Okay. I'm Jackie. I guess we can make up for our introductions video. I'm from Southern California, studying at BYU Hawaii. I am currently on campus right now. Uh, yeah, and that's it.
I'm Molly. I'm from Nevada and also studying at BYU Hawaii. My major is accounting, and I am also on campus.
So today's topic is Regency Fashion. There was 2 articles we were supposed to read that described women's fashion and men's fashion in the early 1800s, and I think were some of them even in like the late 1700s.
Yeah, 1790s.
Yeah. So should we talk about the women's first?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Um,
So it said that Parisian style was like huge influence that they would like correlate with what the French were doing, and so the English style was pretty close to the French style until the war happened and blocked their access to their examples from France. And so I think from 1807, somewhere in there in the earlier 1800s, they had their own examples, and they kind of away from the French influence. And then once the war was over, they had their examples. They were completely off of what the French were doing.
So from that time period of when they were creating it themselves, was that when they were doing the Empire waistline and
I think it's when they had, they were like really high up. It said under the women's breast, and they couldn't go any higher. And then it dropped 4 inches.
Yeah.
Every year. And then eventually it was like right where the normal waistline would be, but
yeah,
it took to get there. But they had a lot of like decorations, like of the Romantic period on their dress. A lot of puffed up places and things like that.
It kind of seemed like at one point they did kind of go for a little bit more of a simple look.
Yeah, with
what they do.
The dress robe combination.
Yeah, that one.
Not as form fitted and stuff like that.
And it also talked about, I thought it was kind of interesting how it talked about the neckline and how it talked during the day, and it showed some of those pictures during the day they would wear like the long sleeves and like turtleneck coverings, and then at night it was like very low cut.
It reminds me of like when people do day makeup and night makeup.
Yeah.
Like that's what I thought about when I was talking about that.
I thought that was kind of funny. And almost in a way kind of weird, because I felt like the women back then had to be very conservative with what they did and what they dressed like and how they said things, but I guess at night when they had parties or whatever, that was like acceptable.
They were more seductive.
Yeah. But then in the previous readings, it talked about like if women had sex with guys or whatever, they were like really looked down upon and
passed out. Yeah.
So I found that interesting when it talked about that.
Yeah, it's completely contrasting.
Yeah. And I wonder what made them think that was like acceptable.
It didn't say why, it like didn't elaborate on that, but it said that the movies, the the wardrobe people in the movies get it wrong. Like they always are the revealing day and
Yeah,
night, and they don't ever do the more conservative
yeah,
dress style for daytime.
yeah. Like Pride and Prejudice. Those are
Yeah.
all hanging out.
Yeah, and then it also said that they get the corsets wrong for the time
Mhm.
period. So I don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Was that, sorry.
it's just like mostly like one idea. Like they had corsets, but I didn't know there was two different kinds of corsets.
They said the ones that they were the more looser fit ones, right? It
Yeah,
wasn't as
time period.
constricting.
Yeah, the ones for a Victorian period were the ones that are tighter waist.
Hmm. So that was kind of something interesting too. Like, I don't know, over the generations, style for women has become more relaxed and
Maybe
even,
maybe it's because of the body image. Like
mhm.
they were allowed to have more of a not such a form like a sleek body. They were able to have like carry a little bit more weight around areas, and it was acceptable and not looked down upon, or you weren't socially outcasted if you were a little bit overweight instead of like the skinny
Well,
model supermodel types.
they actually like preferred curvier women over
Yeah,
skinnier women. So that was something I found interesting in the reading is it talks about like the shape of the dresses made them look a little bit more thin. But then in like a reading before we had it talked about how they liked the curvier women because meant they like were wealthy because they could eat. So I
yeah,
wonder that transition if they were finding slimmer women to be more attractive than what they previously had. But I know like they still preferred the curvier women. So that
yeah.
I don't
And I think it influenced the dress style as well. Like you said, the dress made him kind of look thinner, but some of
yeah.
like the dress and the robe didn't have any like form fitting really, so it made him look probably plumper than they were.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. Um also let's see. Talked about their hair too. How it's not as done up as it used to be and I wonder if that was because of the war because they probably were more busy or busier with activities, so maybe they didn't have a lot of time to be spending on doing their hair.
Yeah, probably. And then also the block of influence, I think they just kind of had to go with their own kind of ideas of how it should be, trying to keep up, and it just went that way with the
Yeah.
simpler.
Hmm.
So that's all for women's style. Yeah, that's what they talked about, the dresses and the hair and their influence.
Mhm.
So for men's style, it said that they went a simpler version as well, and far away from like the frills and the lace and the embroidery.
Mhm.
So it asks about why they tended to go to a simpler fashion.
Um, I think they probably tried going for the simpler fashion because of the war and because they probably were so busy with what's going on with their economy that maybe they didn't have enough time to spend on like getting ready. I mean, they probably spent hours. And the guys almost seem like back then they were way more into their looks and or just as much as into their looks as the women.
Yeah, it showed like high class, like
Yeah.
upper level guys
And
with more frills.
and they would wear wigs and things like that. So I can imagine that would take a while.
Yeah, just as long as a lady would take, yeah.
Um,
Um, Also, because the war, I think that since the middle class is the one that was, I guess, fighting the war and they couldn't afford much, so that's what like it tended towards is a cheaper. It's still quality, but not as to
yeah,
do with the all the extra stuff. And they're the ones buying most of the clothes, so
yeah,
their trend won over the higher class trends.
yeah. I bet because there was probably more, I mean, most likely there's probably more middle class than upper class. So, like you said, because they're buying it more, like that trend's viewed more often. So those people probably, the higher up probably saw that. And I feel like something we see often is becomes more appealing with time. So I feel like that kind of had something to do with the style change, at least for the upper class, why they would kind of tone it down.
It also said one part that they, in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Napoleon Bonaparte lost, if I'm remembering correctly, and so they stopped using him as an influence, and they started using someone else as an influence.
Yeah,
So they went with like
yeah,
his choice and the pant choice of him with a
yeah.
more casual look for day.
And it talked about the shoes too. Like there was a brand of shoes. Was it a brand of shoes that he wore that they kind of stopped wearing?
Yeah, with a cut off heel or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, I read that too.
that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, they
Uh,
let not so much like the French influence, but people
mhm,
influence their choice of fashion.
mhm. I also liked for the men how in that article it talks about the men would wear very black jackets and like super white t-shirts, so they were kind of contrasting a little bit. And although their style was more simple, I feel like because those colors that they were using were so contrasting that in a way like it kind of made up for all of the detail that they used to wear, but in a more toned down.
Yeah, because
Ex-
it's like a classic look. Because even
yeah.
now, tuxedos are like black with white.
Hmm.
Um, it also talked about like when the women wore like the white dresses with the muslin fabric. It's
Hmm.
like wet and muddy in England, and so
Yeah.
kind of weird that they'd wear such light colors, but like how the men wore the darker colors because they're probably getting more dirt on themselves, and
Yeah.
it didn't show. They still looked clean.
Yeah. I can't imagine the women running around too much. Kind of seemed like they didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, I think we talked about how the middle class kind of affected
the
their
fact.
style of clothing.
Yeah, we talked about each side, the women's and the men's fashion as well.
Okay, well, um, I don't know if I have any more comments.
I think I'm tapped out as well.
Okay, well, I guess this is the end of our discussion.
Okay.
I guess we'll end it and see what happens.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.